Welcome to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Delatory Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the Brian Moe, the social media advisor for Delatory, and I also happen to be a below-knee amputee. Let's get into today's episode. How's it going, everyone? My guest today is the president and CEO of the Amputee Coalition and a below-knee amputee, Jack Richmond. Jack, welcome to Amp Life.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
I wanted to start off by asking you about your personal journey as an amputee. When did you become an amputee?
Well, in 1987, I had an accident at work with a forklift that crushed my foot, and it resulted in an amputation below the knee 6 days later. So I guess I'm coming up on my 30th ampuversary.
Oh, wow. How long did it take you to get back to your life and enjoying the things that you like to do following becoming an amputee?
Well, of course, it is a transition. First you get back home, you get back to your family, and eventually I got back to work. And then eventually, I got back to cycling. It was a pretty competitive recreational and cyclist, riding, some cycling races every year. It took a little longer to get back into that because that was kind of my hobby at that point. But I did ride my first race just 9 months after my amputation. And I tell people I didn't win, but I beat a lot of people with two good legs. So
that's incredible.
That meant a lot to me at the time. Yeah,
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was I read up on anyone that I'm going to have on the podcast. I read an article several years back now. You pointed out that you're not an amputee runner, but rather a runner who just so happens to be an amputee. Can you tell me the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's interesting, but I've thought about that, and I've been asked that question before. But to me, it means that you're not defined by your disability.
Okay.
So either you're not you're an amputee. I'm okay with that. Being called an amputee, I'm comfortable with that. But I really think that we have to look at ourselves as a person with an amputation. That you're not defined by your disability. And what that kind of meant to me was, in the beginning, your world kind of revolves around the fact that you've lost the limb. So when I first started running, it was all about how am I going to accommodate and this fact that I got a prosthesis that I have to wear in order to run. What are some of the things that are going to be involved in getting on with running more distance and running faster? With all of that, it all sort of surrounded the prosthesis, and it was all about the amputation. Later on, as I just began to run races and was actually competitive with some of my peers in the running club that I was with, I was like, well, hey, I'm no longer the amputee runner. I'm, the runner in the group that just happens to have an artificial leg. But I think it, kind of means that you've healed, in that way to a certain extent.
Sure, and that makes perfect sense to me. Absolutely, I like that perspective. That's a good way to look at it. I came across this quote when I was reading about you, and this quote really spoke a lot to me. But I wanted to ask how this philosophy impacted you. You said in an article, "We all deal with challenges, and sometimes those challenges become defining moments in our lives that make us a better person." How has adopting that philosophy impacted you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. And I think that we all have a choice. I say this, probably more often than I should, but you can either get better or you can get bitter.
Oh, yes.
And I think that, that thinking about that, you do have a choice. Sometimes going through amputation, you feel like everything is happening to you and you're out of control, but things are just out of control around you. But, what you do have control over is your attitude and how you approach that. And I remember there was a guy, Jim McLaren, who was the one who I think the CAF was actually founded, by him, by a group of his friends. And, when he lost, his leg, it was like, well, that's, that kind of stinks, but I'm going to learn a lot from this. And then later on, he actually became a quadriplegic. He was hit by a car in a triathlon that he was riding in as an amputee. And once again, he said, okay, what am I going to learn from this? And I think that many times in our lives, we really do have to approach things as saying, okay, what am I going to learn from this? How can I take this, whatever it is that's happened to me, whether it's amputation or, whether it's maybe a loss of someone in your life close to you or, failure of a business. What have I learned from that, and how can I grow through that experience?
That's a phenomenal perspective. Absolutely. I think a lot of people definitely need to hear that message for sure. So I know that you've been involved with the Amputee Coalition in various capacities for over 20 years now. What first led you to become a part of the organization?
Well, like many other amputees, I was really hungry for information, trying to soak up any information that I could, gain. I started a support group, or actually kind of took over a support group and got it up and running and growing in the Orlando area shortly after my amputation. And going through that, that process, I was always searching for information. And when I ran across the Amputee Coalition, which actually probably at that point, was a year and a half, 2 years old, and, saw some of the things that Mary Novotny with the organization was doing early on with some of the publications, the information, newsletter that was being put out. And I really wanted to be a part of that. And they had a meeting, and I attended one of the meetings early on. There was a meeting in Orlando, and I think that was in the early 90s. And the first one I kind of really remember, I believe, was over in Nashville in 1992. And I just knew that I had to get to that meeting.
I've had both amputees and clinicians tell me that they've heard of the Amputee Coalition, but they add on to that and they tell me that they don't really know what the Amputee Coalition does. And of course, we're going to get into specifics as we go along today, but can you give us a brief overview of the mission and work of the Amputee Coalition?
Absolutely. I love our mission. I have it written on the whiteboard in my office, to reach out and empower people affected by limb loss to achieve their full potential through education, support, and advocacy, and to promote limb loss prevention. So the Amputee Coalition's mission is centered on empowerment, and our programs that we offer, to encourage that empowerment really fall into three areas: education, support, and advocacy. We reach out to everyone, regardless of age, gender, limb loss, limb dysfunction, no matter what the cause or where someone lives in the U.S. We try to reach out to them.
In all the years that you've been involved with Amputee Coalition, in what ways have you seen the organization evolve and grow over this period of time?
Yeah, it truly has been amazing to watch I would call it a kind of a metamorphosis of the organization. Because as it started off as just a kind of a support group for other support groups, and putting out a newsletter and some material and trying to bring amputees across the country together, it's truly continued to grow as we've working on fulfilling our mission. But even though we've gotten to be a much larger organization than we were back then, our mission's still the same. The difference now is through the National Limb Loss Resource Center that we have, and grant funding that we have, and the donors that we have, we're able to take the programs that we have and expand them into something much larger, so we can have peer support across the country. We're able to match up people with peer visitors. The materials, one of the things is writing and updating those materials, because as you know, technologies and things like that change, practices of care change. keeping the materials that we have up to date. And that's a big part of what we do as well. So I'm real proud of all of the resources that we have and the programs that we have. Our national conference, the kids camp, all of those things have been added on as we've grown. And I think it's just amazing to see how we've blossomed.
Tell me about Amputee Coalition's Hill Day. You had that here not too many weeks ago now. And tell me about the purpose of that and how that worked this year.
Absolutely. I'm very proud of our Hill Day this year, what we were able to accomplish. It was actually the end of April, and we had this year we were able to add a day of advocacy training, so it was actually 2 days. So we came in the afternoon, or we had lunch on Tuesday, and then we spent the afternoon listening to speakers talking about advocacy and how we can speak with our legislators and the issues that are important to amputees currently. We actually had 77 attendees that came to our Hill Days, and we were representing 26 states, or those in attendance represented 26 states and the District of Columbia. We had actually 96 meetings with legislators on the Hill, and we actually tripled the number of attendees that we had from the year before's event. Of course, Dan Brzezinski, our chair of our board, who's a bilateral above-the-knee amputee, was there to talk to legislators as well, as was also Jeff Kane, who's a doctor, a family physician from Colorado that's on our board of directors. And Jeff actually chairs our advocacy committee for us, and he was there for that event also. And the Hill Day was actually capped off by a reception that was hosted by Brian Mast, who is a congressman, House of Representatives from South Florida. And he's a combat wounded veteran and a bilateral above-the-knee amputee. But he met with our group, he shared his story, and he answered some pretty tough questions about the future of healthcare. So that was awesome. But the goal of the whole event, our Hill Day, was not a one and done. It was really to provide that education, give amputees the opportunity to become advocates for themselves, to be able to talk to their senators, to be able to go back into back to their states and see their congressmen in their individual states and talk to them, follow up with them there as well. We're really trying to build an army of advocates that can continue this fight for the coverage that we need and keep things moving forward. I'd encourage everybody to mark their calendars for April of 2018 because we'll be holding a Hill Day in D.C. again in 2018.
Very good. As you know and as I know, the issues we face, the legislative issues and the insurance laws and the different insurance issues that face the amputee and the limb loss community, they're so very important. And I have been so surprised recently to hear people, we've been advocating a lot through social media for people to contact their representative, to contact their senator, and they don't understand why we want them to do this. And so I'd like to discuss some of these legislative and insurance issues, but I want to preface this part of our discussion by asking you about some limb loss statistics. Approximately how many people in the United States are currently living with limb loss?
Actually, about 2.1 million people is our estimate currently that are living with limb loss or limb difference in the United States.
How many amputees or amputations, I should say, how many are we seeing every year occur, new ones?
The latest estimates that we have are about 185,000 amputations occur each year in the U.S.
Wow.
That's about 500 a day.
That's insane. What are they saying is the leading cause of amputation?
Well, it's not even close in that area. It's definitely, many times due to dysvascular conditions that can be caused from diabetes and other vascular disease.
Do we see? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's over 60. Yeah, and it's in the realm of 60 or 70%.
Wow. Do we see any race or a particular group of people who are more likely to become amputees than others?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. And unfortunately, the amputation rate among African Americans is 4 times that of what it is for whites. Hispanics also experience amputation rate at more than 1.5 times that of the white population. And some studies have actually linked, poverty status to the likelihood of amputation.
Wow. What are some of the annual hospital costs that we're seeing for amputations?
Well, the latest statistics that we have go back to 2014, and the cost of amputation totaled more than $10 billion, in that year, which is nearly 73% of those amputations were paid for by Medicare or by Medicaid.
Wow. So with those stats in mind, I wanted to ask you, how has the limb loss community benefited from the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, most commonly called Obamacare, since it was signed into law by President Obama March 23rd, 2010?
Yeah, and of course, we never really took a formal stance on the Affordable Care Act or the ACA, but we believe there were a number of positive provisions that came out of that, and we advocated for the 3 main provisions, among others, when the ACA was being passed. And the first one was protection for people with pre-existing conditions. Obviously, if you're an amputee, you have a pre-existing condition. Once you're an amputee, somebody said, that's kind of a lifetime thing. I said, yeah, so there you go. It's a pre-existing condition. And a recognition that prosthetic devices are an essential. They're essential and necessary coverage, and they shouldn't be subject to arbitrary caps and restrictions, like in some insurance companies or in some states have interpreted that to mean you lose one, you get one. They say, well, you have to provide a prosthesis, so they would interpret that as being a prosthesis, one for life, or they would put a cap on it of say, you have prosthetic coverage, it's $5,000 because it falls under your durable medical equipment, and that's all you get. So those caps and restrictions are really not fair when it comes to amputees. Also, expansion in coverage availability for Americans in the lower income categories.
During his campaign for president, Donald Trump promised that if he were elected, he would repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And as most people know, on May 4th, the House narrowly passed the American Health Care Act of 2017. I've seen the CBO score, and a lot of people believe that this bill, as it is presently written, is not going to come to a vote in the Senate, which that remains to be seen. I read over the weekend an article that said the House bill was actually dead on arrival when it got to the Senate. When we look at what the ACA currently offers, how could these potential changes in the healthcare law affect the limb loss community?
Well, Brian, it's true that many of the Senate Republicans and even Democrats are saying that it is dead on arrival with the Senate. And the Senate Republicans are, working to kind of craft some legislation that will impact healthcare reform for a process known as reconciliation. So taking what's there and kind of trying to, change that bill that was presented to them. And, that requires 50 plus 1 vote. So it requires a simple majority to be able to do that. And, of course, things are changing so quickly. We really don't know, what's going to come out of any legislation that might be out there. But one of the things that we really concerns us is that we're going back to that pre-existing condition, recognition that prosthetic devices are essential benefits, and we shouldn't have any arbitrary caps or restrictions to that. And then, the Medicaid expansion was just going to continue to make the devices available to those in the perhaps lower income categories as well. So, when you say how is it going to affect them? Well, depending on what what the laws would be that were passed, could have a variety of effects, all the way to limiting, things as far as pre-existing condition, who would be in that category, some of the pools that people would be put in. So there's a lot at stake. There really is a lot at stake, and that's why we're working very hard with our government relations department, our advocacy committee, to push back on those laws that we feel are not going to be fair to amputees as we go forward.
And you mentioned what you're doing to fight back for laws that you don't think were going to be fair. Tell me about the Amputee Coalition's fight for fair insurance. When is that something that they really started pushing for, and what is that process like?
Well, we started it many years ago, and we kind of when the Affordable Care Act came along in 2010, 2011, it kind of stalled because many of the states just said, well, wait, we've got this Affordable Care Act thing coming. Let's wait and see what it addresses. And it did address many of the things as far as pre-existing conditions. But what it didn't address was, a lot of times the limitations on some of the coverages and things like that still needed to be addressed on, and defined there on a state-by-state basis. And of course, you have some insurance policies and plans that are regulated by federal regulations, and you have some that are regulated by the state regulation. So it's important for us to continue to pursue that grassroots effort. And and that's one of the things we've reinvigorated that grassroots effort with that, and it's a big push that we are going to be working on for the remainder of this year and going forward from there, is really trying to get bills and legislation back before state houses and their senates there to try to get insurance fairness passed in the states. And then also there's been talk of reintroducing the insurance fairness. We have some people that are supporting that in Congress, and that may be interested in helping us to get that back in as a federal legislation.
In May, President Trump released his proposed 2018 budget, which, among many other things, eliminates funding for the National Limb Loss Resource Center. When did the Amputee Coalition partner with the CDC to run the Resource Center?
Well, this actually started back in 97, I think, was with the CDC, and through the changes that over time with the CDC actually it wasn't really a good fit for the Amputee Coalition because of rehabilitation and the disabilities and things like that. It really didn't fit well under the Centers for Disease Control. Once you're an amputee, you're sort of dealing with the fact that you need a prosthesis and you need to get on with your life, and it's more about rehabilitation. Right. Actually, we in 2013 we were able to move over to the ACL, which is the Administration for Community Living, and that's really where a lot of the different programs for people as they age and for rehabilitation, the spinal cord rehabilitation, many things like that are also under the ACL, and so it was just a better fit for us to move over to the ACL.
Tell me about the mission and the work of the Limb Loss Resource Center. This is another one of these things that when we started seeing on social media that this funding could be lost, a lot of people didn't understand why it was important and things like that. So tell me about the mission and work of the Limb Loss Resource Center.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Limb Loss Resource Center operates under the mission of the Amputee Coalition. So once again, our mission is to reach out and empower those affected by limb loss to reach their full potential through education, support, advocacy, and limb loss prevention. The support's provided through our cooperative agreement with the ACL, that they're actually managing that for us, and it provides information and referral center that responds to requests for information and resources about living well with limb loss. So all those materials and things that I talked about, the opportunity to be connected with other individuals through peer support, even our Patty Rosbach, the youth camp, our national conference, all of those things benefit from the funding that we receive with that federal grant.
Wow. Okay. So if the funding should be lost, what impact is that going to have on the limb loss community?
Obviously, I feel like it's going to be very devastating, for us, because all of the information, resources, and things that are specific to the limb loss community that we produce will be lost at that point, because without the funding to continue to produce that material, the funding to continue to send that material out, the funding that we need to continue to be out there and letting people know that these materials and the resources and the peer support and everything like that exists, it's going to really limit what we are going to be able to do as an organization. It would be a big loss for us. Absolutely.
What action can people take to help get the word out about how vital this funding is? What is it that people can do to help accomplish this?
Well, absolutely. Well, getting online, we have if you go to amplifyyourself.org, you'll find there a place where you can, write a letter to your congressman, to your senator, let them know, that we need to continue to support the organization, getting the word out, within the community to say, hey, this is important. We need to do that and to continue to provide that support. But I think that, that letter, the letter writing and contacting your legislators is probably one of the most powerful ways that you can help. Okay. And to spread the word and to let people know, through social media and all of that, that we need to continue the support for the National Limb Loss Resource Center.
Absolutely. A couple of weeks ago, a little more than a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago now, I was in Washington, D.C. for the AOPA Policy Forum, and I had the opportunity to meet with a legislative assistant for my congressman in my district, and I was sharing my story of living with limb loss, and I began to ask myself this question that I want to ask you. What can be done to help foster a change in attitudes and perceptions with how Congress and the president view the needs of the limb loss community?
Well, of course, Brian, being out there and doing exactly what you did, by being there and speaking with your legislator is huge. Absolutely. That's how they get the information, by talking to those assistants, talking to the aides about, how what the needs are out there in the community. They do a really good job of communicating that information with their bosses. They say would be the member of the House of Representatives or the senator that they happen to be working for. So that's number one, a really important thing. The other thing is to get out there just within the community, getting that information out there through social media and talking even just to your friends at work, at church, in the community and things like that. If you're able to go and talk about, our needs with some local, civic organizations, with the Rotary or Kiwanis and things like that. Anything that we can do in that way just to get the word out there and to let people know that, we're not just high activity athletes. We're not the Paralympic athletes that you see out there in commercials and things like that. That we're, everyday people that are living their lives, that are productive and that are going back to work and becoming, getting back to our lives even after the amputation through the prosthetic devices that we have. Also, of course, go back again to amplifyyourself.org. It's a great place to share your story. There's a button that you can click there. and it'll take you right into a scenario where you can tell people your story. That story is going to be out there, and it's going to be there for people to hear, so that they understand it's not just our wounded warriors. It's not just the Paralympic athletes and things like that. It's everyday people that, through the power of prosthetic rehabilitation, are getting back to being productive and being able to care for themselves, being able to go back to work and live their lives.
So I want to switch gears back to the Amputee Coalition and ask about, you mentioned this earlier a little bit, but I want to ask about the Patty Rosebach Youth Camp. What's the mission of the camp, and how is it impacting the lives of children with limb loss?
That's another good question. I love talking about the camp. It's one of the stars that we have on our map here of the things that we do across the country, and that's to make a difference in the lives of children with limb loss and limb differences by increasing their self-confidence, their self-esteem through a traditional and supportive summer camp experience. And the impact that that has, it's a 6-day camp, youth camp. There's traditional camper experience for youth that are aged 10 to 17 with limb loss and limb differences. And the campers are challenged we challenge them to increase their dependence, or to increase their independence, and to test themselves and to build new friendships and have fun through a lot of exciting activities that are all conducted in a very caring and supportive environment. 170 are going to be going to camp this year, Brian. And that's the campers, the counselors, those that are future leaders at the camp will all be coming together. And they all are members of the limb loss community or limb difference community. They're all amputees. So when you walk into that camp and you've got all 4 limbs, you're the odd one. You're not the normal one that's at that camp. They look at you and, like, okay, what are you missing? And if you're not missing something, then, you're the odd one out at that camp. So it makes them feel very confident in interacting with one another. They're not the odd person or at that particular point. Everyone else is like them. So let me just read you what one parent said. The benefits to my child were deep. I expected it to be fun, but I didn't expect to find out that she was a leader and that she could help others and that she was not alone. In addition, that she could really be herself for the first time since her illness and her amputation. She was not able to hide behind her prosthetic limb. She, the real kid in her just came out. Her parents says it was for her a life-changing experience. So, I mean, it's just really powerful. I'll be visiting the camp for a couple of days this year, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely amazing. What an incredible opportunity for children that have limb difference to experience that. That's fantastic. I don't know.
And once again, that's something that we are a donor supported organization. Those funds come in for the camp. They're specifically designated, for the camp. That's all that they, the funds that are designated for the camp, they're spent for the camp and for those kids. But we are, dependent upon the kindness of our donors and those that support us, to put on this camp along with the funding for the Limb Loss Resource Center.
That is just absolutely fantastic. One of the things, I don't know what made me think of this, and I didn't have this in my notes, but I wanted to ask about, I saw this, and this is amazing, thinking about children. Tell me about the, for lack of a better term, the partnership with the Vermont Teddy Bear Company and the bears that are going out. That is just fantastic.
Yeah, well, actually, that was kind of the brainchild of our government relations director, Dan Ignazuski. He actually is from Vermont and doesn't live too far from the Vermont Teddy Bear Company that is right there in Vermont.
Okay.
And so yeah, and so he had the idea of, hey, it would be kind of cool if we could, do something, work with them, and started conversations with him probably a couple of years ago, and it continued to grow and progress, and so this year they, very generously are working with us to create individual teddy bears with different levels of limb loss. So if you have someone that has an upper extremity amputation and happens to be their left arm above the elbow, you can get a Vermont teddy bear with the amputation left arm above the elbow, and of course with the cute little outfits and things like that they come with. You can order them with those as well, or above the knee amputation or hip dystrophic bilateral. So we're really excited about that, and we're working on trying to figure out how we can create some prosthetic devices for them as well. So that may be coming along in the future. But that's a lot of fun. It's a good fundraiser for the Amputee Coalition, and especially with kids. They really like that and really like having a teddy bear that is more anatomically like they are.
Absolutely. It's a phenomenal idea. And I was sitting here struck me, and I had to pull that up on my phone real quick because anything, I'm all about anything that we can do for people, but especially for kids. So many kids say, I really wish I had they'll say a friend like me. And that was just such a great idea. Really, really just love that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. Yeah.
Some people may not know that the Amputee Coalition publishes a magazine. Tell me about In Motion.
Yeah, gosh, In Motion has been around for a long time. And it's published every other month. So it gets out there 6 times a year. It actually reaches around 10,000 people and many more that, because it gets passed around and handed out different waiting rooms, the prosthetic facilities and rehabilitation facilities that it ends up landing in. And for 2017, our theme is all about being. So in July, we'll be talking about being connected. So that's been kind of fun to see that, theme going through the year. Also, it's free. All you have to do is just go to amputeecoalition.com and sign up, and we'll send it to you for free. And on top of that, our best stories and the suggestions that we get actually come from the readers, and so people will be reading through and they're like, "Hey, how about an article about this?" Or "I need to know about this," or "I have a friend that's an amputee and he does this or that." And, so really we get our best story ideas and suggestions. So we encourage people to sign up for the magazine and to send us your ideas and suggestions via email or through our website. And also we have the opportunity to nominate a hero. So each issue, we have a hero in that issue. And so, an opportunity to kind of spotlight somebody that maybe has inspired you.
Very nice. That's fantastic. So most amputees know that April is Limb Loss Awareness Month. When did this initiative begin? And for someone who doesn't know, why is Limb Loss Awareness Month so very important?
Yeah, it started back in about 2010. And of course, the Limb Loss Awareness Month is inspired, by the need to help, people understand more about limb loss and to educate them about the needs of our community as well. So, and it's important because it provides everybody in the community kind of an opportunity to come together around that cause. So we do a lot of social media, pushes out at that time. We make it top of the mind awareness. This last in 2017 in April, what we did is each day we had a calendar on our website, and so each day we had sort of something different to help you to celebrate Limb Loss Awareness Month, and that was a lot of fun as well. But really, it's really about turning up and amplifying the voice of the community for that 1 month to say this is our month. And we actually had 42 proclamations that were signed this year and proclaiming the April as Limb Loss Awareness Month. And even back in the Obama administration, President Obama acknowledged it with a presidential letter. that April was Limb Loss Awareness Month.
So we talked a little bit about this earlier, and a lot of people have seen this hash used on social media. It also has its own website. Tell me more about when the hash Amplify Yourself. When did that initiative begin, and how did that get started?
Yeah, well, we started that kind of right after the first of the year, and Amplify is really about speaking up for yourself and speaking out for others. You know, it's really launched to kind of combat the gap that we have in access to care, and it gives people with limb loss and live difference a voice and a forum where they can actually go there and share their story. They can get information about our Hill Day. They can get information. They can actually go to the Engage platform that's there and be able to write a letter directly to their insurance company. And I think that's fantastic. So if you go there and, for example, you put in the zip code of where you live, and it brings up the insurance providers that are in your area. You can click on your insurance provider, whoever it happens to be, if it's ABC Healthcare, whoever, click on that, and you can actually write them a letter and a comment that will go directly to their medical director and also the CEO of your insurance company. So if you're having a problem getting something paid for, it gives them a voice to be able to go there. Also on legislative issues, it gives you an opportunity to create a letter there very easily online that'll go directly to your congressman, to the senators in your state, and even to the administration as well. So it's that, and it's the stories, but really it's all about turning up the volume of our voice, getting our voice heard out there in the community as the strong voice that we have as amputees when we bond together.
That's fantastic. I want to share this because the program, the whole Amplify Yourself, it impacted me personally. When I came on to De La Torre and they said, "Hey, we want to do a podcast," I said, "No, thank you. I'm not interested in a podcast." And here we are. But one of the things, they were trying to get me to share my story, and everyone has their story and their struggles and how they got from point A to where they are now. And I was really hesitant to do that. And once this thing, I saw on social media, the Amplify Yourself, once that got going and I learned what that was about, I did an entire episode just, telling my story, how it's affected me, my wife, our family, and everything, and how it's brought me to where I am now. And so I really have to credit Amputee Coalition, for having that initiative, because without the Amplify Yourself initiative, I doubt that I would have really had the courage to do that. So I just have to say thank you. I really like the initiative, and I think it's a great thing that you're doing with that.
Great. Yeah. Well, it really has been, there's just a lot of work there, that's behind the scenes and promoting that, and to get the word out there on that has really been big, and it really has been making an impact. It really has helped us to amplify ourselves in the community.
So I know that Amputee Coalition's National Conference for 2017 is coming up August 3rd through the 5th in Louisville, Kentucky. For someone who's never attended one of these conferences, give us an overview of the conference and what can a first-time attendee expect?
Well, the conference is an amazing experience. I hear so many amazing compliments from people that come, and the first-time attendees, and they're just kind of blown away by everything that they see. But just to give you a broad overview, expert-led education. So it's not just clinical and academic experts, but these are actually people that are living with limb loss and live differences that are speaking from their own experiences in there. So that's extremely valuable. And you have a broad variety of experiences. We have panel discussions, so we'll have sessions where it's actually several different people that are living with limb loss or experts in the areas of rehabilitation, things like that. That'll be there to discuss a particular topic. Also training, so there's a running clinic that goes on there. The exhibit hall is always fantastically popular. So all of the these manufacturers of prosthetic components and actual providers of prosthetic care come in and have displays of the different things that they can offer. So it's a tremendous opportunity to learn about the technology that's out there. And we even have technical sessions that some of the those that are manufacturers would actually be running some of the tech seminars as well. Where we have seminars on gait, running, specific to pediatric, walking, clinic on bilateral amputees, adapted activities. So that's a big one. So sports adaptation. So swimming, running, tennis, anything like that. There's a wide variety of things that we offer to help everyone learn something new. And then of course there's outings that we'll have. We have a baseball outing at this particular conference. We're going to be going to the Louisville Bats one night. There's an opportunity for an outing there. Dinner dance on the last night, so that's always a lot of fun. Great dinner and some great entertainment with a DJ and a big dance floor. And it's just an experience that you can't repeat anywhere else. It's an amazing thing. So just really, there's something for everyone. But one of the biggest things is that last year in Greensboro, North Carolina, we had almost 1,100 people that attended that one. I think it was 1,075, something like that.
Wow.
And just the experience of connecting one-on-one with someone else. There's never a conference that I go to that I don't make a new friend and connect one-on-one with somebody who I didn't know before. Maybe they're able to help me. Maybe I'm able to help them. But, just kind of, there's still that thing of knowing you're not the only one. Someone else has gone through the same experience. They've moved on with their life, and you see them grow and continue to laugh and be happy and to have a good time and enjoy all of the things that are there at the conference. It's just very rehabilitating to your spirit.
Fantastic. What do you think are some of the greatest needs facing the limb loss community?
There are many, obviously, and that's a great question. But, one of the things as we look at it right now, well, what's one of the biggest things that's out there? I think healthcare reform and looking at that and just making sure that we're going to have access to the care that we need to be able to continue our lives or after limb loss, limb difference, be able to move on with your life after that. So, that's got to be one of the big issues that's going to impact our community overall, is being able to have access to what they are is tools that we need to be able to get on with our lives. The other thing too is, along with that is research. I think that's another thing that's really important too. Knowing, what is the best care? We say, I advocate for the best care for an amputee. Well, it's really an individual thing. The best care for me may not be the best care for someone else. So you really need to be able to do some research and be able to look into different levels of activity, different levels of amputation, just all of the things that are involved in that really helps to decide what is the best technology for at this level, what is the best plan of care for that. So research is another important thing as well. And then, of course, funding for the programs, being able to continue the funding for programs that specifically address the needs of the limb loss and limb difference community. So we can continue to put out these programs. We can continue to hold our camp and our national conference and continue to put out the great materials and match peer visitors up with each other. That's another big need that we have. And then the other thing too, I will say as well is, not having the, people believing that, everyone who loses a limb can go out there and run a marathon. I'm fortunate that I was able to get into running and run several marathons, but I'm very atypical. I'm not the the regular person out there that, the regular case of the amputations that we see on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's important for them to really understand that we're real people with real lives, and we have real jobs, and we pay real taxes, as we get on with our lives, and just understand how rehabilitative, good access to prosthetic care can be for people.
Absolutely. You mentioned continuing the work and the different things that the Amputee Coalition is doing. A lot of people may not realize that the Amputee Coalition is a donor-supported nonprofit. How can people get involved to financially support the mission and the work of the Amputee Coalition?
Well, of course, it is through support of our generous donors and our corporations and foundations, and the cooperative agreement that we have with the federal government for the National Limb Loss Resource Center, that we're able to provide all of our services. But the donations of individuals, are just huge. I mean, it doesn't have to be, a huge gift, but just knowing that we have a broad base of support from people out there that are sending us $25, $50, $100, $500, whatever they can afford to do to make us part of their giving. We give a lot to the community, and it's really heartwarming when you see the donations come in from individuals that also want to give back, and all of those that support what we do. That means a lot to us. And, literally there's hundreds and thousands of people that reach out to support us in any way that they can. You can go to our website. There's information on there on how you can give. You can call us. We love to have people call us and say hello, and, hey, well, telling you, what a great thing that that the Amputee Coalition has done for me. Let me send you a check or give you a credit card number and make a donation. We can certainly facilitate that for you as well. So we really do cherish our supporters and the donations that they provide for us. So I just encourage them to call us and help us. Absolutely.
I encounter amputees pretty much every day who they're often depressed because they've lost hope. They mistakenly believe that just because they've lost a limb that their life is over. What advice would you give people who are struggling with their limb difference?
Wow, that's a great question, Brian, and I pondered on this one for a while because it is different for everybody. But I would say in general, first of all, don't be too hard on yourself. Losing a limb isn't easy, and you can feel like things are out of control. As I mentioned before, you feel like there's a lot of things that are kind of being done to you, and a lot of things coming at you, and it can really be stressful as you're going through that. But the one thing that you can control is you can control your attitude, and I really think attitude is everything.
Absolutely.
There are so many people that are out there that are willing to reach out and to help you. And when they extend a hand, don't be afraid to reach out and take their hand and let them help you. And remember, it's a process. Once again, be determined to get better and don't let yourself get bitter through the process. But don't be too hard on yourself and take help when it's offered. That's those are the things that I would say. And don't give up. We all have goals. Mine may have been to run a marathon at one point. I have a lot of other friends and people through support groups that I've met that, have all kinds of different goals. Everybody's goal is important, whether it's, to run that marathon or whether it's just to be able to go to the grocery store and push your own shopping cart so you can reach the things on the top shelf. All of those goals are important. Set some goals, crush those goals, and move on with your life.
Absolutely. I've been talking today with Jack Richmond, the president and CEO of Amputee Coalition. For more information about the Amputee Coalition, visit www.amputee-coalition.org. Also connect with them on Facebook and Instagram at Amputee Coalition and on Twitter at Amputees USA. And for more information on how to amplify yourself, visit www.amplifyyourself.org. Jack, I appreciate you taking time from your day today to join me on Amp Life. It has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. You're doing a great service for all of your listeners out there. And keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it very much. You've been listening to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by De La Torre Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review on iTunes or give us a like on Facebook. I'm the Brian Moe. I invite you to visit our website, www.amplifepodcast.com, or check us out on Facebook at Amp Life Podcast.